Thank you so much, Robert. I'm really excited to be here today. A big thank you to Middlebury for sponsoring me. This is a topic that is very near and dear to my heart, so I'm excited to share with you guys what I've learned so far. First and foremost, you may notice I'm not in a traditional Air Force uniform. I have been hanging out with hackers and makers all weekend long, so this is what I like to call my tech engagement uniform. It's really cool because this is what I wear in my personal life because I'm a huge geek. As Robert referenced, I game, I do video games heavily, Xbox One, Steam, even iPhone games, love science fiction, love science fact, love technology, huge into the maker community with 3D printing, which kind of brought me into this. And it's unusual in that as a career intelligence officer focused on support to special operations and counter-proliferation, as well as signals intelligence, that my geek lifestyle would finally overlap with my professional career, but in fact that's exactly what's happened. As I started to delve into this realm of emerging disruptive technologies, I found very quickly that being a geek allowed me to speak both the tech language and the government language. So I'm currently functioning as a liaison between the communities, which was the purpose for my meeting out here this week. And I will talk a bit about self-regulating communities throughout this discussion and how they're intertwined, interconnected with radical leveling technologies. So a little bit about you guys. Let's find out who I have in the room. How many gamers do I have out there? Raise your hands. All right, awesome, awesome. Sort of gamer, it counts. If you're gaming on your phone, that counts. What do you play?
Kerbal Space Program.
That works, that works. How about any hackers? Do I have any hackers? Life hackers count too? No?
Well, not anymore.
Okay, stop life hacking or?
No, never mind.
Gotcha. How about any grinders, biohackers, cypherpunks, do-it-yourself robotics, do-it-yourself drones? Okay, yeah.
Does it count if my kids do it?
It counts because you're a parent, you're involved. How about scientists in the room? Yeah, all right, awesome. So we actually had Admiral Michelle Howard out, the Vice Chief of Naval Operations, while I was at the postgraduate school, and she did an interesting experiment with the crowd. She had everybody raise their hands high and say that, oh, okay, where are all my gamers? And so as she did that, then she started to count down by age. Okay, everybody 21 years and younger, put your hand down. 25, 30, 35, at about 35, most of the room went down. That's part of the problem I'm trying to get at. There's a big gap in government right now between those who are very connected with technology and the senior leadership at the top who's responsible for building this technology policy. I'm going to get into some of those challenges as well. One of the things I found during my technology engagement is that science fiction actually plays a great role as far as being able to illustrate some of the technologies that are out there today. It's familiar, people are comfortable with it, and like Steven Spielberg says, I'm not preaching to them then when I'm talking about it. So let me give you guys an example. How many folks saw Age of Ultron? Yeah, awesome movie, right? Guardians is still my favorite. Guardians of the Galaxy is still my favorite. Loved it. But this movie is great because it gives me a lot of maneuver room when talking about technologies. So here's how. For those of you not familiar, Ultron is an artificial intelligence that they find. Tony Stark, pictured front and center, Iron Man himself, brings Ultron into the lab and is trying to contain him. Ultron gets loose on the internet and starts causing all kinds of chaos. Not only that, he's replicating himself, he builds a robot army, and he's got all these autonomous drones that are out there running around trying to take out humanity. At the same time, you have the Avengers, and this is a really unique group of folks. You've got Iron Man, who has a biomechanical suit. He has an arc reactor in his chest that's helping him stay alive and also powers the suit. Oh, he can fly, and he has lots of cool weapons. You've got two genetically modified humans in the Hulk and Captain America. I think it worked out better for Cap than it did for Hulk. You've got Thor. I'm not going to touch on Thor too much here, but he's useful in some physics when you're talking about different types of physics. And then you've got two regular Joe average humans when you're talking about Clint Barton and Natasha Romanoff. But what makes them extra special is that they're using radical leveling technologies to gain parity with the supervillains. And we're seeing some of this happening today. So how much of these technologies I just described do you think are out there? Like actually out there today that you can see, touch?
Probably 3.
Okay, 3. Anybody else? Any other guesses? How about if I told you most of these, if not on the cusp, were already out and about? This is pretty cool stuff. So early on in the movie, if you remember, Clint Barton got shot, and they started 3D printing a replacement skin patch for him. Today you can 3D print 12 different types of synthetic skin. You can also culture skin cells from an individual patient and 3D print their own skin for them, in the case of burn victims. Fairly new, still in its infancy, but it's out there. This is an example from Lawrence Livermore, one of my favorite places to hang out. I love those guys. They've got all kinds of cool geek stuff going on. They're actually 3D printing self-assembling blood vessels. Why is this significant? Because for the first time, they're creating actual functioning capillaries that could be used to repair living biological systems. On top of that, this now impacts the ability to produce on-demand blood supplies that are disease-free, and you don't have to maintain large blood stocks. So if you're in a disaster recovery environment or you're dealing with a combat zone, somebody comes in and needs help, you can blood type them and print their blood right there. Pretty awesome stuff. Drones, big in the news these days. Lots of fears about drones, and rightfully so. There are definitely some significant concerns out there. The Germans just came up with a really cool anti-drone laser. It can target a maneuvering drone at up to a quarter mile away and shoot it down in 2 seconds or less. Why do we care? Hezbollah, Hamas, ISIS, they're all using drones, commercial off-the-shelf technology right now, to do targeting, to do reconnaissance and surveillance, to vector artillery in, and we're also seeing improvised explosive device drones, which, while they're predominantly in war-torn areas now, could pose a threat to the public in the future. So this is an area that we're definitely keeping an eye on, and we need to have more of these discussions about what to do next. My alma mater, NPS, we had a drone swarm. 50 drones launched at once, really cool. The best part, one person controlled all of them. The next step, they're going to launch a 50 drone swarm of 50 autonomous drones, and then a 50 versus 50 drone swarm where they're both autonomous and they're going to maneuver against each other. I want to see the video. I'm really excited. That's going to be awesome. Tony Stark, Iron Man. He's got the super suit. He's got biomechanical devices keeping him alive. We have that today. So the North Star 6, for anybody that's interested in biohacking or the grinder community, this is a device that you can implant in your hand. Currently, it just does the LED colors, but the North Star V6 version 2 will actually have biometric capabilities, so you can push biometric data to the device of your choice. Not only that, but it will be Wi-Fi or Bluetooth capable, so you can actually get text or look at different information on the back of your hand or wherever you put it. For diabetics, it might monitor your insulin levels and alert you if they're high or low. And then it has something cool called gesture recognition that they're trying to do, which will allow you to actually point and turn on your coffee, or wave and open your garage, or do something crazy like this, and your car starts. So now you truly can have the Force. So any Star Wars fans, it's coming. And then we have our growing transhumanist movement. That's Neil Ferguson. He is the de facto figurehead of the transhumanists. What you see is a camera that he had implanted in his brain, which is called the antenna. He is a colorblind Spanish artist. Because he can't see colors, he wanted to be able to determine the dominant color in front of him. So what the camera does is it selects that dominant color, and then it plays a musical note in his ear so he can tell what it is. So it translates it in that fashion. And these people, the transhumanists, have physical challenges that they're trying to overcome by coupling biological and mechanical systems together. So some pretty innovative spaces there. Also Iron Man, talking about biosuits or exoskeletons. These are two great examples. The tactical assault light operator suit, the Talos suit, was designed for those guys and gals that are first through the door. These are our special operations breachers that are going into hostage rescue situations or into bad guy areas. We found that they have a usually high level of critical wounded or casualties as soon as they go through the door. So we wanted to improve their survivability. So SOCOM talked to MIT. MIT designed the suit. It has significant C2 communications capabilities. It also has the ability to bioregulate, so you can make it hotter or cooler depending on the environment you're in. It can send out biometric data. It has hemorrhage control. It has oxygen. And the suit itself has liquid body armor, which when you touch a button will send an electrical charge through that will actually harden that into ballistic plating. So pretty cool features. One that I'm really excited about is the Rewalk, and there's a number of exoskeletons out there doing this. The Rewalk 6.0 actually helps people that have lost the ability to walk or have never been able to walk do so. It's giving them that independence. They're able to walk up and down stairs over uneven terrain, and every year we're seeing this capability get better and better. So one more for Tony Stark. Yes, there are jet-propelled humans. If you guys have not seen Mr. Rossi out there, go check him out. Jetman is his name online. Yves Rossi, he's a former Swiss fighter pilot, and there are some awesome videos of him flying formation with Rofer, his partner in crime, alongside of some jets, some fighter jets, and some Dubai commercial airlines over Dubai. Beautiful footage, but that airspace is getting pretty crowded. A lot of concerns, a lot of things we need to think about. And I was just talking with Robert before I came up here, and George, yesterday or the day before, they released a tape of Frankie Zapata's racing team where he's developed a hoverboard and he rode it 3 miles down the coast, and they've got boats chasing after him as he's riding about 8 to 12 feet above the water. So yeah, Back to the Future fans, it's happening, it's happening. So let's talk about the biogenetic aspects. I'm going to touch on this. These are two of my favorite projects, BioBots out of the University of Illinois. These are centimeter-long robots that combine currently skeletal muscle. It used to be cardiac muscle from mice that used electrical stimulation. These actually use light to maneuver them. The cool thing about these little robots is that they can be used for specialty advanced surgeries. They could be used to administer drug treatment for tumors or other conditions. They could even be used to insert into a biological system to detect and potentially remove contaminants that are there. And one of the more unique discussions has been, since they're a soft body robot, that we go into a disaster area, maybe an earthquake, and people are trapped under buildings. These guys will not disrupt those destroyed buildings. You can release them, they can go down through the building and then beacon out the location of live heartbeats, thereby helping to map where people are and making the disaster recovery efforts more effective. Anybody heard of CRISPR-Cas9? I know a few of you have, yeah. This is a very interesting space. Bottom line, CRISPR is a bacterial set of scissors that you can go in and snip DNA and modify it any way that you would like. The significant pros with this are that you have the ability now to directly attack and potentially stop certain types of cancer or certain genetic deficiencies or even diseases like malaria. The downside is it's very easy to use, and some of the papers that have already come out have shown that once it's released into a living system, it becomes 97% effective for every following generation. So it will persist if released into the environment. Now, if you bring an ignorant actor or a malicious actor in on that, you could have significant agricultural damage or environmental damage. The other concern, which popular media, I think the series Scorpion and The Last Ship have kind of capitalized on this, is the use of this device or this technique to produce genocide-type devices to target specific portions of the population. So another area where there are a lot of moral and ethical discussions that need to happen in addition to the regulatory space. And then, of course, everybody's favorite, the Internet of Things. We have 50 billion devices coming online in the next 5 years. We're already seeing issues with ransomware. We're already seeing issues with security breaches, people having their homes surveilled via children's devices and cameras that are there. This is going to be a big challenge. Even the hackers that I talked to this weekend were highlighting this as a major concern, because as you sell an appliance and it is hooked into the Internet of Things, what's the incentive for the company to keep that firmware up? They want to sell you more appliances, right? Maybe they keep that firmware up to date 1 or 2 years into it, maybe 5 or 7 years if you're lucky. But once that firmware is no longer being updated, then what happens? What happens to your security? What happens when Ultron gets into your refrigerator? All right, so this is a quick overview of where I'm going from here. How I got involved, a little bit about radical leveling technologies and what their definition is, some solutions, and then what you guys can do to help. this is where I started. I was initially asked to look at additive manufacturing to help senior leaders get smart on increasingly fast-paced technological evolutions. And these were occurring in a variety of spaces. They wanted to know, what does this mean for security? What does this mean for the economy? What does this mean for society or governance? And it impacts all of these areas. So as I began to dig, I realized that additive manufacturing is not the only technology having these exponential effects. In fact, there's a whole group of them. And again, this weekend, my interaction with the hacker and maker community revealed that there are more that I need to add to the list. We tend to, from a government perspective, look at this from a very linear fashion. We update our technology in government 1 year, 5 year, 7 year, 10-year plans, and we expect that the threats will pretty much follow along in that type of pattern. So I have the evolution of the mobile phone up here. Not very exciting, right? I mean, it pretty much followed that path as expected. There were a couple offshoots. You had some tablets and some readers, and then 1 or 2 weird things like the use of cell phones and IED triggers. Not too unexpected though, pretty much right along the line. What you see at the bottom here is what exponential technology looks like, and this is what additive manufacturing is doing by itself, independently. So now you have a technology that's impacting multiple areas all at once, very fast, and each individual exponential technology is creating new capabilities in 18 to 24 months. Let me put that in perspective. Today, I have a 3D printer that prints Iron Man out. It costs me $27 and I do it in 4 hours. In 2026, I print out the same figure for $3 in 7 minutes and 30 seconds. That's just one of these technologies. Does not include the effects of convergence. When I bring convergence in, now you have what I'm seeing as exponential plus effects. This is creating a very difficult environment in order to predict what capabilities might come out of this. You can get new technology spin-offs. Additionally, the benefits and the risks become even harder to assess. I'll give you a couple counter-proliferation examples. One of 3D printing by itself, and one of a convergence, and then I'll do one of a spin-off technology that we've recently seen. So the individual additive manufacturing story is, we had a scientist up at Lawrence Livermore who decided to take a nuclear component and 3D print it. And he wanted to see what the difference would be from the original production to 3D printing. The original production would take a full manufacturing line, multiple months and 168 welds, and a whole bunch of people going in and out of the factory to make. He made it in 4 hours in his garage. That's the difference. So the Tesla plant in Fremont, California, pretty cool. If you buy a Tesla, I understand they give you a tour, so I'm saving up. They have coupled 6 degrees of freedom robotics with 3D printing with a whole bunch of other cool tech. The manager can walk in with his iPad in the morning, program the entire line. It will run for 24 hours. It will run for 48 hours. The only time human intervention is involved or required is for maintenance, refurbishing materials, or to move products off the line because they've been finished. This changes a lot of things for us as far as from an intelligence perspective, what we're looking at. We're now dealing with a very small footprint. It's harder to detect those signatures. The typical signatures that we look for are not there anymore. Those are gone. You have highly accessible technologies that are low cost, require a low amount of skill, and you have access to an open forum of free online expertise. Additionally, this makes it that much harder to identify safety and security threats because I don't know what somebody is doing in a garage space, or if they have a really cool plant like Tesla's plant, you can reprogram that in a matter of minutes to make shoes, to make chips, to make batteries, to make guided missile parts, to make explosives. But I can't see that. It depends. If you have the right materials, you can do all of that, and I won't know based on the exterior of what's going on. The other challenge I came across, we are very limited within government as far as having the expertise we need to talk about these technologies. We're being forced to go out to non-traditional channels, and the expertise that we need exists in a lot of these tech community spaces, but the relationships are not there. That's a big problem, and we need to start fixing that. So I labeled this group of technologies as radical leveling technologies because individuals or groups can use them, to level the playing field, more or less. So what are they? All right, and this is not, I talked to my hacker or maker friends, they said I need to add more, but the baseline that I started with are the following: additive manufacturing or 3D printing, synthetic biology, advanced genomics, neurotechnology, nanotechnology, quantum high performance and cloud computing, the Internet of Things, advanced robotics, programmable materials, the blockchain, which is behind cryptocurrencies today, artificial intelligence, and the Internet. These are all advanced by, with, and through the Internet. We're seeing a heavy digital influence. That digital environment is playing a big role. You're also seeing this broad decentralization of power. Has anybody seen Jeremy Hyman's TED Talk? It's fantastic. He does talk on new power. He's written several articles. Highly recommend it, because we're approaching this from an old power perspective, but what we're seeing is that there are a lot of new power effects. New power is the democratization of power. You now have crowdsourced, crowd-shared, open, participatory, peer-driven, and distributed power, which can then be a force of nature when it's focused by mass crowds like we saw in Arab Spring. If you have a coordinated crowd, this becomes a very powerful effect at a national or even regional level. You also have these open source communities, online open source communities that are coming into play. These are our tech communities. These are our innovators. A great example of the types of innovation that can occur, one of them came from Ireland. Cathal Garvey, I think he was in his late teens, early 20s when he did this. Biohacker, he was setting up his own lab. He needed a centrifuge. Well, the university level centrifuges are about $2,000. The super centrifuge is regulated. So he said, well, what am I going to do? Well, he took a Dremel tool and he printed a $3 or $5 part, and he put micro tubes in there, and he spun them 33,000 RPMs, and for less than $50, he had the ability to do the same thing that a university could. So this gets a little bit at that export control discussion, because are we going to be able to control what we would like to or what we have in the past, or are these technologies going to remove that ability, and do we need to seek perhaps a new paradigm for how to work with these technologies? And then finally, the ability to produce generational leaps and transnational impacts is a big point that we need to consider. This is especially true within third world countries. Access to technologies like 3D printing, for example, could spark an industrial revolution, but building upon existing technologies could also springboard these countries forward and create radical change, radical effects that they may not be ready for, and it might result in conflict. So how do we manage that transition? What does that look like? What types of exponential leadership do we need to involve in these discussions to make sure that that transition goes smoothly? In large part because the unknowns, as well as the rapid pace of advancement that I'm seeing, the discussions that are surrounding the policy, the regulation, the threats for radical leveling technologies is a very complex space. That's why it's important to set the stage early on so that we don't make dangerous mistakes. And so for me, the single most important step that we can take is balancing the discussion, making sure that we're being smart in our approach to technologies. Technology is agnostic. It's not good, it's not bad, it's not evil. Applying labels that cause fear, or labels that place emphasis just on the positive aspects, but they ignore malicious or ignorant use, that's dangerous. That does not balance the discussion. And I've talked with folks on both ends, where you have, we're doomed, the robot overlords are coming, Skynet's going to eradicate all of us, the world's ending, everybody just, that's it. And then I've talked to folks that are like, hey, why are you being so negative? Just focus on the positive. Look at what the technology can do to help us. And that's not necessarily the best approach either, because then you get blindsided. We're still using old power rules to govern technology, and this isn't viable. It has to be a team effort, collaboration between the government and the various tech communities out there, because now we have small groups and individuals that are gaining parity at the state and regional level, actors that are able to talk for the first time as individuals or groups to heads of state, or they're, again, surging crowds in response to different topics of interest to them. So we have to take a new look at how governance is working and how we regulate on a global scale. And then capability and intent. This is one of the biggest challenges for government right now, because we lack the expertise, we lack the access, and we certainly lack the capacity for these particular spaces. Getting in and talking to hackers and talking to makers as a government official, you have a language barrier, you have a cultural barrier, and you have a lot of distrust that's there too, and for a number of different reasons. There are some really good engagement efforts underway. The FBI has one with the biohacker community. It's fantastic. You had a lot of fear about biohackers becoming bioterrorists and launching attacks, and that's not the case. But the FBI did something really smart. They hired a geneticist, Edward Yu, and got him engaged, and he started getting all these other agents engaged who maybe didn't have a laboratory background or genetics or biology background, but they were interested. And what they did was they started meeting with people face to face. They started going into these hacker spaces, and they started having these hard, messy conversations. And what happened over time was they found they had the same goals, they developed a shared language, they developed a shared culture, and all of a sudden biohacking wasn't that scary anymore. Now for the first time, they could go in and say, hey, we have concerns about this, this, and this. And the biohackers say, oh, don't worry about that. This is, we do this and this and this, and this is all standard procedure. Additionally, the biohackers, in response to the FBI and the public concerns, came up with overall standardized guidance that is now being spread globally throughout the community to guide ethical standards of scientific practice within their community. Pretty cool. So now we're seeing that self-regulation aspect at play. Bottom line, the truth is out there. We have to be proponents of it. We need to be first with it regarding new technologies, and we must be able to confidently articulate both the value of a specific innovation as well as honestly consider potential for certain aspects to be used by bad actors to malicious ends. So here's why I have concerns about radical leveling technologies. Enabling factors and threat vectors were the two areas that I broke down. These are cutting-edge technologies that normally would require a great deal of expertise to successfully leverage. You need to be a biochemist or an organic chemist or a genomist or geneticist, have that type of background. That's no longer the case. We're now seeing significant downskilling to where you can purchase pre-built kits. There's lots of forums. You have point-and-click technology. Any Xbox or PlayStation gamers in here that went through the Lizard Squad hacks of December?
Where they took all the account information.
Yes, yeah, and they also shut down the servers, being the Grinch who stole Christmas. Yes, yeah. So these guys basically came out, told Sony and Microsoft a month in advance that they were going to shut down their servers and deny play for all December gamers that were getting the new systems. And they did. And Sony and Microsoft were unable to do anything about it until another squad, hacker squad, got involved, Finest Squad, and they actually went after these guys, figured out how they had infiltrated Microsoft and Sony, patched it, fixed it, and then it's called doxing. They basically documented, provide all the details of these folks out to the community to say, hey, law enforcement, these are the guys that you've been looking for. The long and the short of it, however, was that Lizard Squad, this was their malware marketing technique. They wanted to show that the Lizard Stressor program that they launched against these two major corporations was in fact effective. And they sold a whole bunch online. We most recently had a group of UK teens that tried to employ it against a company and got caught doing it because Finest Squad helped to package or helped to patch this. But this is the example of folks that don't have that hacker capability, but they're able to purchase the packages and function as script kiddies and accomplish the same level of mission or operation. You also have civilian to military tech processes. This is a problem in that civilians are accessing the technology first, they're building it, they're driving it, and so they understand it very, very well. The government does not. We are not at the beginning of that process, and usually we're the end user. So when you're not in it and living it and breathing it, it's very hard to effectively regulate it because there are subtle nuances there that if you don't understand can create a less secure environment. Additionally, a lot of our regulatory laws are built for linear technologies and for the physical world, not cyber, which is boundaryless. That's a big challenge. And then for threat vectors, we're already seeing that 3D printing is having impacts on industry, having impacts on logistics. We're seeing issues with IP. It's a huge topic. Intellectual property, how do we regulate that in a digital environment? That's really, really going to be a hard conversation. And then how can we work to verify the safety of specific products that are for sale online? What's safe and what's not? How do we get at that? And that's just the regular internet. That doesn't include what's going on the dark web. Overall, arms racing, I'm seeing some of this occurring right now, but it's mostly with drones. And so it's groups like Hezbollah, Hamas, and ISIS. As they're learning, they're diffusing these tactics and techniques to other groups. And that's a concern. We expect to see other technologies. We already see them leveraging social media, but we expect to see other technologies as they become more accessible come online with these groups. And if you start to watch them, even through open source media, you can see that diffusion occurring. Because you'll see one group post on their forum, or they're posting on YouTube, or they're posting on one of their propaganda sites, and before long you'll see it spread out to other groups. So something to watch if you're trying to track diffusion. And then also expect to see drone-borne IEDs. We're already seeing that on the battlefield. Expect to see that later this year coming up as a security topic, potentially in Europe. There are a lot of concerns over what kind of threat this might pose throughout the European theater. We're already seeing 3D printed gun parts and guns coming across the border. Border Patrol has already found some of those. And then 3D printed IED parts. That's not too far behind. And nuclear components. Great case in point for folks that are into the maker community. If you go to 3ders.org or make.org or makers.org, check out one of those sites. They talk about the Sellafield nuclear plant. In this particular case, they've been highlighting how 3D printing can help shut the plant down by producing non-existent parts or unique one-offs. That was then transferred over to a number of forums and discussions online, and most recently on NukeNet, the Chinese National Nuclear Corporation announced that they had used 3D printing for the first time to make a lower tube socket for a nuclear reactor fuel assembly. So now we're getting into that counter-proliferation space and saying, okay, we're trying to control this, but these new technologies are changing the rules. How do we get about that problem, get about discussing that, and what can we do? What's viable? I think the first step is that we proceed by addressing these enabling factors and these threat factors through aspects like education, ethical discussions. We also need to be discussing and partnering on smart tech policy with a lot of these technology groups. And tech policy is the next piece, because this is a big one. In many ways, poorly developed policy and regulation are making these challenges worse, not better. The case study I used is the Cody Wilson Liberator study. Cody Wilson, for those of you who don't know, is a cypherpunk. He's about digital freedom of expression. So that's what the Liberator was designed to do. He's trying to make a point. The State Department came in and say, hey, we're going to regulate this. We believe this is regulated under ITARs. And then we had Philadelphia pile on behind that. The city council, I think it was, mentioned that we're going to regulate all 3D printed guns or 3D printed gun parts. If you find them, you're going to get in trouble. Well, what does that mean? What does that look like? Is there, is it the same for art? Is it the same for free speech? A lot of challenges. So this is basically a repeat of the old peer-to-peer music filing battles that you saw between MGM and Napster, all over again with new technologies. That's exactly what's happening. The top piece I'm not going to go into too much, because if you're interested, you can read about it in The Starfish and the Spider. This just details the PTP battles that existed prior to. But compliance without effect, there was a great article by an attorney, Danton Bryans, fantastic article talking about how Cody Wilson put the Liberator out there. Department of State said, take it down. 100,000 copies had been downloaded already. Even though Cody Wilson took it down, it continued to proliferate. And on top of that, the online community was doubly incentivized to proliferate the design due to a perceived government overreach. So you had the Streisand effect and the motivation crowding effect come into play as well. So this did exactly the opposite of what the State Department intended, or what they had intended to accomplish. The majority of forums, chats, and discussion spaces that were openly talking about 3D printed guns went private from the public space, went to private spaces, and then you saw Disarming Corruptor. Has anybody seen Disarming Corruptor online? It's really cool. It's an encryption tool. Wired did a I think an article on it about a year and a half ago. It's designed to take stereolithography files or CAD files, which have intellectual property concerns or weapon files that you don't want people to know about. You disguise them, say, as Mickey Mouse. You post them on Thingiverse or 3D Hubs or another site, and if any one of you pulls that down and prints it, it's going to print Mickey Mouse. If I text you a code, though, and you pull it down and print it, it's going to print a 3D printed machine gun, or it's going to print an intellectual property protected design. You don't know it's there. So again, this is another example of how we reacted. We didn't think through what we were doing, and we didn't understand the subtle nuances at play. Now we've got dangerous blind spots that potentially malicious actors can take advantage of because the groups have gone anonymous. I talked to a lot of makers this weekend. The make groups that are involved with 3D gun design, they're not interested in really talking with the government right now because of this overreaction. So we've got some damage to do to repair there. These are going to have to be discussions that we start to do outreach on. So when I apply this to the counter-proliferation mission set, these same effects make my job infinitely more complex. We're tasked to protect the public globally, but we have limited capacity. It's hard to engage, direct, and then respond, so we're forced to react only. We also have a hard time identifying true threats because we're not embedded with these tech community cultures. They're going to see it first because they live it. We're outside of that, so again, we're trying to sift through an entire culture of people now, when before, if they're operating openly, we can actually see what everybody's doing, and then you can also see some of the folks that are maybe doing something that's not right, and the community is also more motivated to come and talk to you and say, hey, we talked to this guy or gal over here, and they're doing something that we tried to fix it, but we think it's a danger to public safety or to national security. Can you guys look into it? They're more willing to come forward and have those discussions. So we don't want to shut them out. We don't want to react. So the big piece here, we've got to make sure that we're proactively engaging to ensure the threat vectors are addressed without limiting innovation. At the same time, we need to collaboratively build policy that enables innovation but still addresses those threat aspects. And that involves people. So technology is agnostic. Understanding capability intent is key. And when you couple technology and people, you can get either a solution or a challenge. And if we're engaging people correctly, we should be coming up with more solutions than challenges. So understanding what new capabilities exist, how they're going to impact and shape and change society, that's really important because it allows for a proactive approach. And when I say proactive approach, I break it into 3 areas. Corrective planning. This ensures that we have time to make smart tech policy instead of reacting and making a situation worse. Proactive thought, which means we have time to actually instill ethical practices and a culture of accountability, including exploration and self-regulation options. And then proactive action, which means that we're all working hard to make the world a better place and limit malicious actors from using tech for bad purpose. Speaking from experience, those of us in government, we do develop institutional biases over time. We do get stovepiped, and it can be very dangerous. And especially now when we have these exponential transitions on the horizon. So we need exponential thinkers, people that don't think like us, people who challenge us to think in new ways. I think the tech community does that very much. We also need leaders who are globally willing to learn how to live and lead in an exponential world and can grasp the complexities and challenges to come. And that's that education piece that I touched on. And then most of all, we need people who are comfortable operating in unconventional ways and applying unconventional solutions, and who are fearless in the face of failure, because we're going to fail throughout this process. But the key is fail small, fail forward, because if we have big failures, those could result in dangerous effects. You could have a conflict erupt, for example, if you mismanage one of these transitions. And it could erupt at a local level, or it could be a regional effect. That's something that we want to avoid. So what does this look like? How do we get everyone to come together on the development of international authorities to address things like cybercrime, or 3D printing and regulating digital design, or even chemical and biological warfare? How do we get those discussions to start happening in light of these new technologies? And how do we get non-state actors to participate and adhere to these agreements? Because this is no longer just about nation states. You have other players on the scene now that are beginning to impact these areas. So I started with collaborative effects. I really believe that a firm foundation in this particular area can overcome a lot of the potential challenges before they begin. And then the next step, looking at regulatory effects, we need to revisit a lot of the existing policy that's out there and regulation, both nationally and internationally, and identify shortfalls, and then also develop new ideas for how to regulate and innovate. And then when I think about active effects, I think about what I see that's working out there today. I love cyber bounties, and hackers are excited about them. They want to contribute, they want to make a difference. This is, we're gaining expertise, we're finding creative open source solutions, we're actually saving the government money and protecting the public, and this is a win for everybody. The privateer clause is still around. This is a controversial topic, but when you see groups that are out there that are doing good work, let's find ways to continue to enable that. If they need additional bandwidth, if they need a server, if they're trying to make projects that are helping with disaster recovery or civilian affairs or diplomatic outreach, let's help them get the tools they need to be effective at doing that. And then finally, I talked about in my thesis ways to create true government and public intelligence fusion centers. How can we smartly do that? That way we've got a collaborative environment to respond to national security, natural disasters, regional or local terrorist or national terrorist threats. So to date, these efforts are still fairly limited. It's a good first step, but we have a lot of work to do. We still have cultural and language barriers. We still have information sharing barriers. So that true open collaborative environment does not exist yet. These fusion centers, in my mind, should also be a focal point for education and outreach, telling the public how to best leverage these communities to the benefit of everybody. So I'm an optimist, I'm an idealist, despite my chosen profession, because I see a lot of incredible good that's coming forth from these technologies today. And the more we become interconnected, I think we really have to become more collaborative in our approach and more inclusive in our approach. So, as I've been telling all the hackers and makers, we're the government, we can't do it alone, we need you guys to help. So here's how. There are a number of different sites that you guys can get involved with. These are just a start. Games for Good, for my gamers in the house, you can actually design video games that will help impact people. There's a great site, you can pull it up, I don't have my phone with me, but you can pull it up on your phone. It's called freerice.com. It's a micro-volunteer program where you answer certain questions, and every question you answer correctly donates 10 grains of rice to the UN World Food Program. Pretty cool stuff. Small scale impact, but over time you can actually have a large impact. Hackers, Hack the Pentagon. This is an opportunity for you to get involved and actually improve national security. And give them feedback. If you're hacking them, give them feedback and say, hey, we like this program, we feel like we can do more of this, let's develop a community space around it. I've worked a lot with I Am the Cavalry. These guys are doing a bunch of work on the Internet of Things. How can we improve Internet of Things security? How can we improve security for autonomous automobiles and Internet-linked medical devices? Great group, they're looking for volunteers. And then finally, for our biohackers, how can you help improve medical technology to treat diabetes? And there are a bunch of different communities out here. Night Scout is just one of them. Right here, you can talk to Ferenz. He's got the Treatment Not Terror program, which has caught the interest of the maker community. You can actually get involved in developing a new way, a better way, to treat cancer and at the same time remove radiological threats from around Europe. And then finally, Epic Quest. This just came out from Department of State. You can go online, form a team, and over the next year, work on a collaborative method for all nuclear-capable nations to use to tag and track and verify, provide instant verification that they have positive control of their materials and their weapons. A lot of different ways to get involved. That goes back to my Avengers initiative. So I'll take any questions. There's some resources if you guys are interested. The ones on top are available from Amazon, including the 3D printing and the healing by remote. And from Networks and NetWars over are all available free online from Lawrence Livermore or from NPS. So thanks for your attention today, guys. I really appreciate it.